Hαίrε, and welcome. Today we are in chapter 2 of the Gospel of John, starting our next page of the text. We're going to be taking a look at verses 5 through to about the middle, let's say the end of verse 6. That's about halfway. And that's as far as we're going to make it today. We're going to try to get this done in 2 videos. And I'll try to keep this shorter than the last one. I shouldn't have quite as much to talk to you about as I did then. Here is our rubric, everything that we're looking for as we go through the Greek text. Let's go ahead and read it aloud. Legei he meter autou tois diakonois, hoti an legei, humin poiesate. Esande eke lithinai, hudriai, hex kataton katharismon ton, eudaion, keimenai, korusai, ana metrates du a tres. And that's as far as we're going to get. That's some difficult reading there. Whoa. Our very first word is our verb with epsilon iota. That's going to be third person, singular, and it is present tense off of leg. It's active and indicative. It means says. He meter we've run into 2 times before as our subject, so I'm not going to parse them again. I'm just going to leave it as that because we've already done it. The mother, understanding that it is our subject. Autou we've also seen before, but I'll do that one more time because it hasn't been as frequent. And it's also a demonstrative, not a noun. So it changes a lot more than nouns do. This is genitive, singular, and we know it's masculine because it's referring back to Jesus from our previous verses. Of him. Tois diakonois is our next word. Tois here tells us, and the omicron iota sigma in this noun confirms for us that this is dative plural. And without already knowing more about the word, we wouldn't know whether it's masculine or neuter, but this one is in fact masculine, sometimes used as a feminine too. I don't remember actually if it has feminine forms, maybe not, but masculine predominantly. And this is an indirect object to the, and then diakonos is a somewhat special word. We, in modern English, we have the word deacon and deaconess, which are the descendants of this one, but the meaning is not quite clear. As in English, we say, that person's a deacon, and it doesn't have quite the same concept necessarily as what it does in the Greek. So there's a word which we could easily confuse with this one if we were just to look at the English translations of 2 different texts, and that's doulos. And I don't remember where the accent is. Doulos means slave or bond servant. That's got its own thing. You should ask an actual historian about what is a bond servant, not me. Whereas diakonos doesn't mean slave. Instead, it means a helper or a servant. Plural. So doulos means slave, someone who is, I've now forgotten the proper term, but they have no freedoms. Whereas a deacon here is somebody that has been employed and is probably paid, whereas a doulos wouldn't necessarily be, and a bond servant maybe. So I want to make sure that there's a clear distinction here. These are not, whoever these diakonoi were, they are not the slaves of the household, but they're probably hired hands, perhaps even family members. That would be a question for if they were family members, that would be a question for a historian. Let's move on. We've got direct discourse, we know because of the legei right there. And we want to find our verb, legei. This eta sub iota here is our personal ending off of legs. It's the same verb, but this is a different form. This eta sub iota instead tells us it's what person it is, but also that we've got a mood change. This is third person, singular, and it is still present because it's the same stem, and it is still active, but it is now subjunctive rather than indicative because we got the eta instead of epsilon with that iota, which means Since we have a subjunctive, we've got some special clause, which we'll want to figure out in a moment, which means we can't actually translate the verb yet. We're going to have to leave it alone until we have the greater context of everything else. So looking before us, we've got ho, ti, on. Let's leave the on alone for the moment, but we can take a look at ho, ti. Ho, ti actually comes from this word, which is hos, tis, and it is a relative pronoun. I think the accent goes right there. Yeah, that makes sense. Hostis is the masculine for it, and then it's hetis, and then ho space t. I don't know why there's a space. Well, I do know why. The space is there so we don't confuse it with hoti, different word. But what this means is whoever or whatever. Since we got the t, we know that this is going to be neuter, and it is singular. It could be our subject, but probably not, because lege, in this case, since we got humin, not subjudo, with the oda there, that we know this is dative plural. This is our indirect object, which means we want a direct object, something to be said to this indirect object. So accusative makes the most sense here, not subject. But we could try it both ways once we actually know how to translate this. But whatever is how that is translated. Whatever, unknown, who mean, to, you, all. And then poiesate is a new verb, which means we've got a new clause. So now we can take a moment to pause. I'm going to put a comma there and look back at on lege to figure out what type of clause do we have here. We know this is subjunctive, and we know that on introduces specific types of subjunctive clauses. Furthermore, if we were to take a look at on in the dictionary or in a grammar book, it would tell us that on plus a relative pronoun is used in one very specific, well, technically two very specific types of clauses, and I believe they are future conditional and general conditional. I could be getting the names wrong, but since we have present here, and as everybody should know, there is no future subjunctive. Present introduces the future of a conditional sentence, and then it's the other tenses that'll introduce the general. Present plus hoti on is going to give us future conditional clause. It just means whatever, and then we would say our subject tells. We wouldn't translate it as a subjunctive in English. Just say tells or says to you. And then we have our next clause. We do not translate this. There's no word in English that fits. Now, we could put the word may in there, but that draws away a little bit in the English what this is actually trying to say. It of course shows us that it's subjunctive, but it doesn't accurately portray the same sense as just this. Whatever our subject says to you all. And as we can tell from the context, this as our subject just doesn't appear to be right. It would be whatever says to you versus whatever he says to you. Since we know that Jesus is who his mother was talking to beforehand, we should stick he in there as the best sense. Whatever he says to you all, poiesate. Ate, specifically the te right there, tau epsilon, is looks like our second person plural form, and poies tells us that this is aorist, but based on the context of what we have in this clause, we actually know what form this is. It's an imperative. Second plural, aorist, active, imperative. And this is a single time action. Go and do this once, don't go and do it repeatedly, as would be implied, but a present imperative. And this, of course, like I just said, means do. Whatever he says to you all, do. Moving on to verse 6, ason is our verb right there. Alpha nu is our personal ending. That's going to be third person plural. And this comes from eimi. It's our imperfect, active, and indicative. Since this appears at the beginning, there are two options. it could be indicating the existence of something, or it could just be acting normally and connecting two different things together. Let's see if we can find a subject for it to clear that up. De ke lithinai. Lithinai does appear to have alpha iota as a nominative plural form. But this is an adjective, so let's look ahead to hudriai, alpha iota again. So these two look like they go together, but they could be completely different declensions. We'd need to know their dictionary entry. And I believe this is hudrias. So this is going to be second. And I think this is lithinos on. So also first and second declension. So yes, both of these are nominative plural feminine as our mutual subject. Adjective modifying noun. Pretend that's pointing through all of that, if you would. Lithianai means stone. Think lithos, stone. And hudriai is just water jar. So we don't have an amphora. An amphora, probably draw that since I brought it up. Shaped like that. Normally they would be stored in sand coming up to about right there, so they don't fall over because it's peaked. So this is not an amphora necessarily, it's standalone by the sound of it. And besides, amphoras would be made of pottery. Moving on. So, taking a look at this, doesn't look like we have any other noun in the nominative to connect this to, so this is indicating existence, so we'd say there were hex. Ooh, we left hex out. Hex could either be modifying a prepositional phrase, which doesn't make much sense, or our subject right here. Our subject is probably the most likely. Hex means 6. There were 6 stone water jars. K, of course, means there. It's an adverb. De means but, or and, unemphatic. Moving on. Kata, prepositional phrase. Looks like it's taking accusative here. That's genitive article. So that doesn't work with kata. Ton katharismon, accusative, singular. And this one, I believe, is masculine. Katharismon is an... actually, I think this is an adjective form, possibly a noun form of katharizo, which means to clean, to purify, and this means purification. The prepositional phrase ends right there, and then our only problem is figuring out what kata is doing. Now, as I was looking through all the different translations for kata with the accusative in the dictionary, I couldn't quite figure out exactly what was the best option. There are 3 different English words that we could use for it with the closest construction that I could find. The construction is called, it's isolation. Starting now. Specification, or separation. Ugh. And the options are in, to, or by. As I said, they're the closest thing I could figure out to what the options for kata are. So there were 6 stone water jars in the purification, by the purification, to the purification. I think that to is about as the best option we have. It could be that I completely missed something in the dictionary, in which case I'm sorry. But we're running long already. So we need to move on. Tone is genitive, eudion is genitive, it's plural with omega nu. And eudion is going to be masculine of the Jews. Kmenai. Alpha iota is our ending right there. Men tells us that this is going to be a middle passive or deponent participle. It's going to be modifying hudriai. So that's good. Nominative, plural, feminine. Kmai is, I believe, the first principal part of this verb, so that's going to be deponent. left out the tense, present, and of course participle. And this just means, kaimai means I stand. This means standing. There were 6 stone water jars, 2 for the purification of the Jews, standing. Moving on. Korusai is, I believe, another participle. So we're going to look ahead, see if we have a verb. Nope, no verb in there, so just have a participle to work with. Alpha, iota is again our ending. Omicron, upsilon, sigma here is the connection between our personal ending and the stem of the verb. This tells us that kor is present, and this is going to be active. Nominative, plural, feminine, present, active, participle. And this one means hold, so we'd say holding. It's omicron, upsilon, sigma because it's feminine. Otherwise, we would find the ONT plus the third declension endings for the masculine or neuter. That's kind of one of the frustrating things about the active participles is the feminine doesn't follow the pattern of the masculine and neuter. But the feminine is first declension, which actually makes it easier, even though it's a new thing to try to remember. Ana is a preposition. Yes, preposition. Break blank there. Metretas is a accusative plural. This is alpha sigma, not a third declension. Also not a genitive. So it's accusative. Singular. No, it's not singular. Contradicting myself already. Plural, and I believe masculine of the first declension. And I took a look at the dictionary again for ana plus accusative, and this one actually has a special meaning with metretas, and then you've got duo and tres, which are adjectives of number. This means each. And the UBS, which is a Greek, a book of the Greek text, supports this idea. So if I'm wrong, I blame them. Each metretas we translate as measure, but we get measures. Duo e tres. Duo, of course, means 2. Tres means 3. They're both going to be modifying this. And a, unaspirated, means or, giving us an option between these two. I believe that is all of our text. Let's go ahead and take a look at. There we go. Let's go ahead and take a look at it from verse 5, and then we're going to take a look at the greater context. And if there's anything else that I need to point out, I should stop and do that. Then the mother of him says to the helpers, "Whatever he says to you all, do." End quote. There were 6 stone water jars to the purification of the Jews, standing. We can say standing there. Each holding 2 or 3 measures. Now, I think this was again, according to the UBS, the measures would have been 9 to 10 gallons, or about 39 liters. But that's an approximation. We don't actually know. Now we can take a look at it from the greater context, verse 1, and then the video will finally be over. These things are much longer. And on the day, the third one, wedding happened in Cana of Galilee. And the mother of the Jesus was there. But also the Jesus was invited, and the disciples of him, into the wedding. And since wine gave out, the mother of the Jesus says to him, "They do not have wine." And the Jesus says to her, "What to me and to you?" Emphasis on me. "The hour of me is not yet come." The mother of him says to the helpers, "Whatever he says to you all, do." But there were there 6 stone water jars, to the purification of the Jews, standing, holding each 2 or 3 measures. So far, our text, I hope taking a look at this has been helpful for you. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to get used to the much longer format, and I hope it's not too long for you. If it is, please let me know immediately, and I can switch back, or I can try to switch back. It'll probably take a few videos. Anyway, have a good day. Hey, not asleep yet? That's okay. I've got tons of other equally sleep-inducing videos for you to watch. Check them out.